All right, sir. Welcome to the Biotalk magazine interview. It's a pleasure to have you on board. And like, I mean, after a lot of trouble, we managed to get you on board because you're so
Yeah,
busy and such such an important and inspirational scientist. So I would start with the interview with our questions. Our first question for today is, currently you're working as a senior scientist at Hudson Alpha Institute for Biotechnology. Tell us something about your responsibilities and projects, please.
thanks for having me. It's a pleasure having this interview. Well, basically, I work on the computational aspect of the genomics, and theoretically, I'm called as a computational biologist too. Basically, I work with the next generation sequencing data, lots and lots of it. The idea is to use this genomic data and to in economically important plant species and try to understand the genetics behind it so that they could be used to improve the plant varieties or could be used in the plant breeding programs. And since there are various aspects in genomics, and I work on the quantitative population and the evolutionary aspects of them, and a bit of programming to automate all the things because of the huge amount of data we have. And when I say quantitative genomics, it's basically linking DNA sequence variation to the phenotype of interest, like yield or biotic and abiotic factors like drought or disease control, etc. Well, the ultimate goal is to identify markers and genes that are responsible for that trait so that they could be used for marker assisted selection or hybrid development. So it could ultimately lead to food security, global security. And the other aspect I work is the population genomics. Basically, every species or every plant, whenever it's adapted to a country or a region, it's split into multiple subpopulations. So we resequence these samples to look for the adaptation or how they are adapted to the climate. So it's basically climatic adaptations, soil adaptations that we look in terms of populations. And on the evolutionary side, I look for like the domestication, when and how the species originated or migrated from one country to another, what genes have been selected in the due process. This is necessary because once we know those genes or regions, the breeders could target the regions again. Ultimately, it's ultimately helping the breeders achieve better hybrids. And in terms of plant species, I work on model species like Brachypodium, Panicum, Setaria, and others. And we just got one paper accepted in Nature Biotechnology in Setaria, and I'm a lead author on that. And we work on food crops like sorghum, soybean, beans, rice, and a few energy and fiber crops like miscanthus, switchgrass, sugarcane, and a few ecology and environment species like poplar and sphagnum, which capture a lot of atmospheric carbon dioxide and sequester them. And most of my research is funded by public and private foundations. When I say private foundations, Bill Gates Foundation, for example, is one, and we're supported by all federal agencies. Right now, one of the project I work is funded by Bill Gates Foundation. They have like $6.1 million for studying sorghum varieties in Africa that could be used for improvement of varieties. Well, to briefly summarize, I would say it's basically linking phenotype to genotype, identifying markers and genes that could be used for marker assisted selection, and trying to understand the biology or how plants function and interact with the environment, um, basically for accelerating the plant breeding cycle. And ultimately, all the research we do is all public funded and it's all available. It should be published. Nothing is or patented or anything. It's all public release and everything is available in databases or in the form of journals wherever is necessary. That's what I. And in addition to my present work, I do collaborate with many other institutions, whether it could be CADA in Morocco, which is an international crop research on a mix in maize and wheat. I work with them. And there are a few US institutions and Indian institutions. I work across helping or guiding them doing the proper things.
That's honestly very, very inspiring. So that was a very elaborate description of what you did.
Thank you.
And I'm sure that still doesn't cover everything because your career spans such a long time. but that was, I'm sure that will be very helpful to our viewers. So moving on to the second question, you completed your PhD from North Dakota State University and worked as a research scientist there as well. So what projects did you work on during that time?
Well, right after my undergrad in agriculture, I just flew to US to do my master's basically. And after 1 year of master's, my boss liked my work, and I went to a integrated PhD that would save me a couple of years writing one more master's thesis and everything. And after that, I worked as a postdoc in the same lab. So it was like 12 years in the same lab in the same university. There, the one of my major project was the whole genome assembly of common bean, which was published in Nature Genetics with me as the lead author. And the idea was understanding the evolution of common bean populations and identifying regions that are used for domestication and adaptation. Because common bean is a major crop in the Central American region and the South American region where poverty prevails. So for US, that's one of a major region that has to be studied for. And other than that, during my, as I said, I worked with 12 years. I worked with various aspects of genomics to understand about soybean iron deficiency chlorosis, white mold in common bean, few other diseases, and identifying markers for many biotic and abiotic traits, understanding the demography of common bean, how they moved from Mexico, Brazil to Central America, US, and all other things. And to get the whole genome, it was at least 6-7 years of prior work, like building a genetic map, identifying markers, doing some phylogenetics to select the sample to be used for whole genome sequencing. So my PhD was mostly trying to do all this basic work. And other than that, I did a bit of work, not a bit, a lot of teaching and training students and faculty on various aspects of genomics. At that time, I was the only bioinformatician. So I worked with 15 different crops and at least helped 20-25 students with their PhD projects.
Again, that's very overwhelming. Um, so you said you also help students with their projects, and
right.
Based on your resume, we got to know that you have quite some experience as a mentor and professor in genomics. So what do you expect from students when they enter a genomics or biotech program for courses like masters and PhD?
Well, the first thing, if you are into a advanced degree, is you should have an open mind, and you should be always ready to learn. And the main thing is you should be always be able to consider the alternate hypothesis too. The way we are fed during undergrad is you read a theory book from late 80s or 90s, and you're kind of biased towards those things. But with the advancements in science and technology, you should always think there could be an alternative hypothesis or other side of the coin. You should have an open mind, basically. And second thing is you should be able to spend a lot of time and keep up with all the advancements in science. And next, you should learn across fields. In the sense, like, for example, if you are working with, say, vaccine development, other than just focusing on that virus and human body immunology aspect, you should be able to learn other aspects, whether it could be vaccine production, which itself is a different area, but knowing the basics of that really helps you in many other things. And at the same time, maybe a bit of genomics, so that in the future you could easily design a RNA-seq or anything, so that you could do something else. So it's basically you should be willing to learn across fields. And next thing I would always see is, other than the organism, other than the research field you are in, read at least one paper a day in a different field of biotechnology. As I said, if you're into vaccine development, for example, read something about genomics, or read something about a mouse, or something, a human cancer, all the biotechnological aspects. That helps you really. Even today, that was an advice given by my ex-roommate. I still follow it after approximately 17 years. I still read 2 papers a day. And the main thing I would suggest with students in India is stay away from parasitic journals. There are many parasite journals. Just for the sake of publication, you end up paying 5,000 or 10,000 or something. Just get it published. But really, you're cheating yourself. First thing, your research has no application, you did not learn anything, and whatever you published doesn't make real sense. And in your research area, try to find couple of 2 or 3 role models, read all the previous work, and try to keep update with their all the new papers. And nowadays you have things like Google Scholar to keep update on their papers too. And as I said, never chase for getting papers or building up your resume. In your advanced degrees, always learn to discover or invent something. Then automatically your publications will follow that. And always have a helping hand. So if you know a certain topic, help others who are in need. At the same time, try to seek advice from others too. So like, for example, I might be good in one aspect of genomics, you might be good at other aspect of genomics. So during interaction, I always get better ideas from you, which could be applied into my area. So that's something you have to be. Honestly to say, you should have an open mind. Whether you know the topic before or after doesn't really matter.
That's very important, sir, what you just said. And I'm sure a lot of our viewers, as students, are planning to go abroad to study, to pursue these further degrees. And I'm sure this advice will be very helpful, especially reading a research paper every day is very important. I personally
Right.
believe so too.
Well, I personally say like the first a month or two, everything might be like a new language or a Greek or a Latin, I would say. You won't understand anything. But from the end of say 50th or 60th day, you will start understanding something and you will be able to make sense out of it.
That's true. That's true.
But at least you will know the topics, what's being, or what are the new terminology, what's being. And the papers you read also makes a difference. I would always suggest reading papers from a good journals, not from these
Yeah.
parasitic journals. The thing is, like, for example, I'm not into immunology. I can write a review paper on immunology, reading couple of, or at least 5, 6 papers and a textbook chapter. But I'm not really an expert in it. I can get a paper out. But if I read something in genomics, which I have been working for years, I might project it differently than what all other people see.
That's true, sir. That's so. Talking about papers, you are also an academic editor of PLOS One and have over 45 publications, many in, as you said, nature journals as well. So, technology has definitely brought the scientific community together by providing open access to research taking place all over the world through these research papers. However, do you think such a vast database of research online can be overwhelming for a scientist? And is there any modification that you would like to recommend to this entire process?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of research and a lot of many research papers. But personally, as I mentioned earlier, if you stay away from parasitic journals, you are ruling out at least 70-80% of the research papers. And look for papers that have citations that are in good impact journals. Meaning, because your research, if it has an application or if it has an advancement, it gets cited. So those are the papers you need to focus on. And try to, as I said, try to select 2 or 3 big weeks in your research area, focus on their papers, keep advancements. And in the present day generation, if you don't have a copy of a PDF, you can always go with the ResearchGate or many other social sites where you can ask for a copy of a PDF, or write to the author directly saying, hey, I'm interested in your research, send me a paper. This was not the case a few years ago. And so basically stay away from parasitic journals that will take away 95% of your database.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. That was a great answer. Now, your career and education spans multiple years of quite intense research in genomics and bioinfo. What are the changes that you've witnessed over the years and experienced firsthand in research when you began versus the current times in terms of pace, resources, technology, discipline, and awareness?
Well, basically, since I work with genomics and the sequencing aspect, the scale of sequencing changed a lot, and so is the interpretation. Well, during my first few years of my master's/PhD, it used to take me a week to generate 5,000 base pairs of DNA sequence, and it used to cost me around $1,000. The analysis was basically in Excel files and small text files. But now we have machines that produce 3.1 trillion bases a day with only $6 per billion bases. So you can just think of, for the same 1,000, how many billions of bases could we get now? And previously, we used to chase after one or two genes, trying to understand how they relate to, say, for example, plant height or a particular disease, or how they are affected by drought or things. But now we're looking at all the genes at once. And like humans, we have approximately 23,000 genes. In plants, based on the species, we have approximately 25,000 to 80,000. That's the max I worked with. Switchgrass was 80,000. So we are working with everything at once. And just as an example, as I said initially, generating some 10 kilobases of data, I used to work for weeks understanding that. Now, one of my project, I work with 5 terabytes of data for 1,000 plus samples. We looked for climatic adaptations, its association to various traits like biomass and others at the genome level. And this one was just submitted to Nature basically. So it's basically a lot of data being generated. So the way we learn the statistics, everything, we are using large servers nowadays. It's no more basic desktops or laptops which we use. And like any other field, the genomics field is also evolving rapidly. Awareness has increased a lot, particularly during the last 6 months due to this COVID, the importance of biotech and those things. And I'm expecting all the governments in all the countries, the resources should be improved, not only in terms of grants, but also transparency in allocating grants. I see in many countries they're politically or some other basis biased. And one personal thing I would like to get is I work in a premier institute. Not only people in premier institutions work a lot, there are many small universities and many other persons who are interested to work. So a portion of grants should be allocated to them so we could increase the number of people contributing to biotechnology could increase.
Definitely, sir. That's very true. I feel everybody should get the funds and resources to substantiate their work because
Well, yeah. In in many major countries, let's say for example India, when they talk about biotechnology, it's the only top 5, 10, or 15 institutions that get most of the lion's share of the funds. That's, I don't think those are like 15 into say maybe 20 people per institution. You're only targeting 300 people. They can contribute, but their time is limited, their resources are limited. But if they can share 10% of their grants to say some 10 small universities, you're preparing 10 into 10, 100 next generation people for that.
yes, definitely, sir. Um, the last time I spoke to you via email, you addressed this problem of students lacking foundational knowledge. Like people not understanding key concepts, even PhD enthusiasts. So, do you think biotech enthusiasts today, even at PhD level, somehow lack a strong foundation and miss out on fully comprehending the basics of important concepts? And what are your suggestions to work on this knowledge gap, and how can you help professionals revisit and students learn these concepts?
Well, first thing I see particularly in India is other than those premier institutions, other people who do masters or PhD just for the sake of promotion or getting a paper out, not really interested in doing research or doing some advancements in that field. If that's the case, we can be of limited help. If it's the other way around, first of all, you not necessarily don't need the basics at all. For example, basics can help us understand the topic really better, but not necessarily up to. For example, if you take COVID, for example, right now, no one knew about it. But as I said earlier, if you have an open mind, you are open to learn about that, new technologies in say vaccine development, say Moderna has a new technology. So keeping updated with all those things and keeping updated with all the new technologies, you should have an open mind. First of all, it should not be for sake of just getting a degree, either for your promotion or for getting a job.
Also, sir,
Uh,
sorry, would you like to add something to it?
Basically, they should have the enthusiasm and zeal to learn.
Yes, definitely. So your current goal is also to promote life sciences research in India. From what I got from our conversation, what motivated you to do this, and what are your plans?
Well, personally, I would like to return to India and I'm working on some alternative plans for that. I work at a premier institute in the world. If you take the whole genome sequencing, which started with human genome sequencing, our institute produced, my present boss and the director of the institute produced approximately 20-30% of the whole genome sequencing of humans. So this kind of considered as the premier institute in genomics. And right now, just my lab of about 8 to 10 people on the computational side and about 7 to 8 on the wet lab, we generated more than 50% of the plant genomes in the world. And the vast amount of data we generate is one of the highest in the world. So I'm working in a place or one of the best or one of the pioneer in the genomics field. It's not just the assembly of whole genomes. We work with various aspects of genomics like quantitative, population, comparative, molecular biology. It's a lot. And our ultimate goal is to understand the biology behind this trait variation. And in this particular field, in my field, I see there's a large gap in the sense like the amount of data being generated or the number of people really involved in genomics. Well, limited resources is definitely a big reason, but I personally feel limited knowledge is a big one. Well, you have this faculty, I mean, you have these people who are already into particular research areas from years. It's hard for them to change or it's hard for them to implement a new thing easily. So it's the next generation of people who could adapt to this. So which are the present PhDs and the postdocs, I would say. My plan is to be a mentor for these interested candidates. And it's all completely non-monetary. So if a person, I'm planning to start a site and kind of reach out to people, the idea is, for example, you are interested in a particular aspect of genomics that you want to learn more, that you want to do at your home in your spare time. Well, I would be a mentor for yourself, looking at your idea, and if it's reasonable, feasible, forget about the resources. I said that because we have a lot of sequencing data that's available in open source databases. And when we publish a paper, we only look for 2 to 5% of that amount of genomic data. There are many aspects that can be looked from the same data that's openly available. So all you need is a decent computer, or which even I could provide. I have a big server myself. If you have the enthusiasm and zeal to do a new thing, contribute something to science, I would just want to be a mentor. On the other hand, since I said I'm in the advanced institute doing many analysis, developing new methods and all those things, I plan to do a bunch of YouTube videos and on how and why we should analyze this, how do we interpret from this. So it's basically when you read a, I'll say, Nature paper or a Nature Biotech paper, you should be able to understand what they're talking about. I know many people, at least from the smaller institutions, are really new to a Nature paper or a Nature Biotech paper. What it's all kind of a new language to them, what they're talking about.
Yes, sir, definitely. I would like to say the more I get to know about your work, it amazes me how much you've accomplished. And I'm sure a lot of our viewers there are going to take back from what you just said and will approach you for mentorship. And I
Yeah,
really hope
definitely.
that.
If someone is, as I said, if someone is interested, say, for example, you are interested in certain aspect of genomics and you want to learn more and contribute more, so this is what I was thinking. Is there something I could help? And I would definitely, if it's something in my realm, I would definitely say, hey, we have all this data that's available in, say, NCBI or some other database, and this is something we could work together. Or if it's completely beyond my knowledge, I can always ask a person in that particular field who is a friend of mine, say, hey, this person is interested, but he's in India doing a job or already in other lab doing his PhD. So do you mind helping him? So it could be a weekend work or a spare time work that he could have an additional paper or additional advancements that not only helps him, not only me, but the community as a whole.
Yes, definitely, sir. Um, Lastly, our magazine intends to bridge the gap between students and professionals to make biotechnology accessible to everybody. That's what our tagline says. What do you think about this initiative?
Well, frankly to say, when I heard this in July, I just thought, okay. But once I opened the website and started reading it, seriously, I was amazed. by your initiative. Frankly, even at this stage, I don't have that big an initiative. Being just just completed your undergrad and having that an initiative from the bottom of my heart, I felt so happy, and it was such a great thing. And when I read the papers, particularly from the students, I felt like the amount of time they took to review that particular topic, write about it in detail, it's not that easy unless they have real interest in what they're doing. So during my undergrads, I never had that push. So having that really helps them in their careers, not only their writing skills, but also advancement of science for them and for the community as a whole. And as I said, like, it's a really great initiative. I was really surprised when I heard that you were one of them, because I was expecting a big professor, some 50, 60 plus years experienced person starting this. But when I heard about you from others, I was really, really amazed.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
I mean, if you're
thank you so much, sir, and thank you for your time. So you can see this interview in our next month's edition in September 2020.
Sure.
Yes.
Thanks for having me. And do you need a write-up of any of these things, or you just want to go with the video session?
So we'll add a write-up for this. We'll write it we'll
Sure.
take it from the interview. Yeah.
Sure. All right. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.